Yeah. Thank you all for spending your time coming out tonight. I don't really often give talks, so it's a rarity for me to give a talk. I'll talk on my 5 decades in architecture, which just seems... So I went to Jamaica this summer. This is where I grew up as a child. I grew up in Trench Town, where Bob Marley and the Wailers come from. And we see what the devastation that Jamaica just recently went through and the rebuilding that's going to be necessary. As you said, I'm a second generation Windrush. I went to Hillcroft School in Wandsworth, which became Ernest Bevin, and now Ernest Bevin Academy. We had Mark Bolan, T-Rex went there, Tony Mayo, Jimmy White, and the Mayor of London, he was there as well, he went there. So the picture on the top right-hand side was that when I left school, I wanted to be an architect from the age of 12. I don't know why, but I just wanted. And I left school with O-levels and GCSEs, but they wasn't the right ones. So I started off on the bottom ladder, started with the City and Guilds, you know, which is the basic on the bottom run. So I became an architectural technician. And then I worked with George Wimpey's, because George Wimpey's, they took on 7 students in their, on their course, and on the indentures course for 4 years, but like I am, I broke it after 3 years, got fed up with it. So then I went and worked for the PSA. And that was a typical drawing office in those days, you know, no computers, you know, everyone sweating over their Anchor Paul's desk. And what inspired me with Wimpey's was they developed the Wimpey no-fine system, which was a fast way of building using concrete, but as you can see, it leaks like a sieve. So from there, when I was at the PSA, all these architects used to just swan in and swan out and give us all of the technicians all the work to do. And I said, I want to be one of them. Now, how do I do? So someone said to me, well, the AA. So I said, AA. So anyway, cut long story, I applied to go to the AA. I got a scholarship. I got a scholarship for the AA, and this was the BBC in Portland Place, my leopard skin building, which was in the Royal Academy summer show. When I left the AA, I went to work for YRM for a year on the Gatwick Airport, and then after I did my part 3, then I set up my own practice in 1985. This was my first project. Every drawing was done by hand. I did all the services, layouts, I designed all the furniture, everything. And I was influenced by Mike Davis, Alan Stanton and Ian Ritchie. That was my tutors when they did the Pompidou Centres. So exposed cladding, this was the first of MVHR, which we had to drag in cold air and take out the stale air for the salon on pinpointing it. And that was made from a kit of parts. And it was opened by Billy Ocean on the night of the Brixton riot. So while we was having the opening, they was bursting into Currys and raiding Currys and carrying televisions over their backs in the riot. This is Walter Siegel was my tutor as well. As a practice, we was asked to do some consultancy work for South London Family, and John Brooms was the architect, and this was for a black community group. So you can see the colours, the Caribbean colours that was used in the same, this is in Lewisham, and this is a RIBA competition that I entered using the Walter Siegel system. I was also asked to, this is Princess Diana, the Vauxhall Hostel. At this time, this was the most complicated refurbishment project in London for social housing. This was the first time cost plus contract was used and construction management was used. So we paved the way in using procurement. The first phase project, we had 6 months to get it open. We did it in 5 months and it was 20% under budget. The main building was three and a half years. We delivered that in 6 months ahead of programme and 20% under budget as well. So that's when construction management started hitting the housing sector. My practice has always been in Lambeth for 20 years and we did a lot of regeneration work. Never got paid, but still, that's architects for you. This is a skateboard park that we did. They wanted an international skateboard park. This is Stockwell Park Estate as well then, which we did some feasibility on. Our scheme in Newham was the first scheme that they call modular building in the architectural press. That was in the year 2000. That was timber frame solution. This project, I have 100% track record in planning. But this project took over 4 years. This was in Lewisham. It's in a conservation area, backs onto an allotment. It's in a floodplain area, and it just took so long. But eventually we got planning. A garage site, backland garage site there. This was a Stephen Lawrence competition that we entered. That was won by David Adagay. But we kept the original building. We overclad it to get the extra spaces on. And then they had the charity dinner at the RIBA in 2018 to raise funds for that then. In 1984, we did the first BREEAM Excellent Housing Scheme in Lewisham. Everything seems to be in Lewisham. The space heating cost was £170 a year, and that was in 1994. The Midlands project was one of the first shared ownership scheme in Wandsworth. We went for planning on that. The planning inspector said, never say never. He never thought we got planning, but we got planning on that. Now, those houses were sold for 260k and now they're selling for 800k each. And the other one on the right is a Walter Siegel one coming from before. We also won the Deputy Prime Minister deep retrofit and MMC using kit of parts. This was in 2001. So we had for rough sleepers, it had training facilities for young people to for their businesses on the ground floor, and then on the top floor we had accommodation made from timber frame system, and the brise-soleil and the balconies, they was all made off-site and assembled on site. So this is going back 2001. At that time I started getting more feeling for MMC because the industry, I used to go to these conferences, talk about MMC, and I was there on my own. You know, no one else was on that same journey. This was another garage site that we did in Barnet, and that went on to win Grand Design, the Civic Trust Award. It was the first Sedum roof social housing project. And then we used in the gabion walls, we used the crushed concrete from the garages for the gabion walls. So we started using recycled materials as well. And that was in 2002 as well then. This was an overcladding building in East London where we saw that overcladding is something, and we started experimenting with keeping existing buildings, but we didn't get anywhere with this competition. On this one, Galleon Owens approached us and said that they wanted an iconic building for Thamesmead because Thamesmead wasn't getting the support from the local residents. So we came along on that building there was the old boiler house. So we took down the whole boiler house and we put up this circular building here. And then on the other side was the boxing club, which that was a sketch and that was a final project. And the circular building is like a donut, open donut, and it just lets the sky in as well. And then this one, it steps up low because the road, the causeway went up, and then this building stepped up as it went there. But now you understand that Thamesmead has now got new town status recently, which is quite good. But all these houses was designed to be Parker Morris standard and above. So this was another scheme we did in Enfield on this pub that two people got murdered, and the local residents, they came up in arms and they wanted it demolished. So we came up with a scheme using sedum cladding and a lot of other energy efficient solutions. We put the balconies, the deck access, because that was out of favour then. So we put the deck access on the back, and put the building address in the street there. This was interesting. When I went to NASA, I met astronaut Alan Bean, who flew to the Apollo. And then at that time, they told me that they've just engaged with a new company called SpaceX. And they're going to design the next level of spacecraft, and they will be coming back into the atmosphere and be reusable. I've never heard of SpaceX, but now everyone knows SpaceX. And then they talked about building the space station, and they was using what they called mirroring. And now NASA is the one that came up with the term digital twin. So that digital twin is NASA's call. And then they talked about using hydrogen fuel cells and things like that, which is now coming into the industry. So in 2007, I started getting involved in how can we make panelised system. So at Future Build, we erected the building. It could be disassembled and reassembled in a barn. And it was featured on national television. We had inundated with inquiries, but we couldn't address it because it was a new concept at the time. So, cut long story short, so we took it down from there, put it in the barn, then diserected it. Then the secretary in the office, she took the components, her and her husband rebuilt it, and then she had a working studio from home. So it just proves that you can disassemble and reconfigure buildings. So that's my concept. We entered this competition in Ireland. They was looking for low energy kit house, but we didn't get anywhere. But that was the concept. And then I started thinking, then I formed, I took another direction, because every 10 years I tend to take another direction, try and reinvent myself, and I felt that MMC was the future. So I set up Buildeco. So modular components, I tried to change the mindset of the industry and trying to work with like-minded people in the sector. So what was net zero? I came with the balancing the elements of all human needs. And then I came up with the humans must reduce carbon, or carbon will reduce humans. And we're seeing that now, happening now. So my concept with Buildeco was, that was the bubble support. Everything, the delivery, manufacturing, fabric, kit of parts, all within the bubble. But the things that you can't control that I found was the clients and the land, legislation, statutory authorities, and utility companies. All the rest you can control. So I thought, okay, so that P stands for platform, design for manufacture and assemble. dismantle, repurpose and reconfigure. That was my agenda. So I looked at the automobile industry. I mean, the Daimler car was 1892, the first car. Then Model T, they built 15 million Model T cars. And John Egan tried to change the construction sector. Then you look at aerospace. I mean, the first aircraft was in 1920 something, and all the components of a Boeing concept Dreamliner is built in 8 countries around the world. It's then shipped, all the components, to America and then assembled. And then we're talking about cars, which has a safety factor. It moves. Airplane flies. A building is static. We've had MMC, the first MMC kit of parts was shipped to Massachusetts in 1626. That's over 400 years. We've had MMC in the industry. Why are we still struggling? So, on my journey, I looked at, we've built using volumetric or panelized. I've always felt that panelized is the way forward because it reduces your footprint. Volumetric, you're transporting volumes of air. I understand you can build in a factory, but we've come up with a solution that you can build on site with precision engineering. So the first scheme on the right was made from C24 timber. That was in 2011. One skip was used. This building, this school building, was also made from C24. It was 27 metres long, 9 metres wide, 2 stories, built by 4 men, 1 electrician, 1 plumber, from the foundation, 20 weeks. This was made from light gauge steel. That was the active classroom in Swansea. They produce more energy than what's required. So all these projects, use minimum skips, minimum waste, and they're all precision engineering. We work within 1 millimetre, plus or minus. The diagonal across that building, which is 27 metres long from panelised system, was within 10 millimetres difference across the diagonal. So that's how accurate you can get. Temporary accommodation we've looked at, which you can clad later on to give it a longer term life. This one was in Hounslow. This for the self-build and custom build. We just proved that you can have different house types and you can configure them in all different combinations, and then you can have, because you can have deck gardens above there, different 1 beds, 2 beds with gardens there, so we just played around with. We also showed that vernacular, you're just having the cloak. You can dress it in whatever material you want. You can, we had stones there, stone slips and things like that, and gabion walls there as well. I sat on the board for a housing association for 13 years. We've done some amazing scheme. That's the Cube in Hackney. That was the tallest LVL cross-laminated building at one time, and then this is the project in Walthamstow that regenerate Walthamstow. So I was on the board for, as I said, 13 years. So I saw all different designs coming from different architectural practice, and my eyes was, I looked at all the performance specs and everything like that. I was only supposed to do 9 years, but I kept my head down. We went on to win the Sunday Times about our garden cities using MMC there, how to deliver a million homes within the Oxford and Cambridge corridor using 2 different house types. So that was just using 2 different house types and the variety that you can get there as well. 2019, we was all getting shortlisted, but this is the one that Top Hat won. And you know what's happened to Top Hat. They're no longer around. Is everyone familiar with MMC, what methods of construction and industrialised? Okay, great. So how do we get young people to build? I came up with the concept that you start off with a starter home. So the first one is a single story, 1 bedroom. Then as their family grows, you're on the same footprint. So you add the next story up with a terrace on the back. That's stage 2. Stage 3 is you fill in that terrace, then you become a 3-bed. Then stage 4 is you become a pitch roof, and then you have 4 bedroom, and then that is 170 square metre from that to that over a period of time. We've done some competitions on car parks for homelessness. This one was in California on one of their cars, and bringing natural light back into the centre of the building as well. This is all using panelised solutions. This is looking at overseas off-grid housing in developing countries, Africa, West Indies, etc. Looking at all the documents that come out that you have to make sure that you tick all the boxes, you know, and it's interesting. We're still waiting to hear from the Future Home Standards, and for me, any future homes must have an MVHR system in there. You know, I can't see any modern houses that don't have. We've put it in our building and it works perfectly. There's no condensation, whatever. Get It Right initiative says that the industry wastes £21 billion on rework. £21 billion on rework. That's how wasteful our industry is. In COVID, I came up with this concept is that we put the elderly people on the ground floor, we have the duplex for the family units above, and then we have new young couple with 1 child on above. So we kept them with 1 unit, so it was a contained mixture for young people getting to mix with the elderly people and things like that. This is the scheme that I proved my concept of the kit of parts and one-stop delivery. This project took, from start to finish, I was just looking at the date, 8 years. 8 years. The planning took 6 weeks. The project and the negotiation we had with the local authority from start to finish was eight years. I mean, that came within COVID. Obviously, we had COVID then. But I was the principal designer and the principal contractor. I knew every nut and bolt that went into this building. That is why this building has been defects-free for 5 years. No defects at all has been reported, and this is a social housing project. So it just proves that it can be done. And we had women in construction there. We had ex-offenders working on site as well to give them some normality back into reality. So these are just some of the finished and the thermal bridging details that we had there done. Then from that, we went on to doing future-proof, because for me, all houses should be future-proof so that it can be upgradable in the future, not like what we're finding now, that we have to spend tens and tens of thousands on retrofitting our buildings. You know, going forward, houses should be future-proof, in my opinion, and we have a solution for doing that. I've done several tours in Estonia because they've got their timber and we've built in timber, and I've been trying to get them to use LVL, laminated veneer lumber. or CLT, but they're now going more into CLT then. Yeah, that's me and Levi Roots, Reggae Sauce. We won award from Windrush then. Black History Month at the House of Lords there. This was the Windrush reception at the Speaker's House, and I felt kind of embarrassed with me on the monitor there, and then, so I've been there. I'm in the Jamaican Books of Britain's 500 people living in the UK, and we also got an honorary mention for Jamaica for our MMC solution, delivering low-cost housing in Jamaica as well then. I was invited to House of Lords to sign the Nelson Mandela book. There's Lord Bird, advocate for homelessness as well, and Clive Lloyd, the cricketer there as well then. I was there at, before Labour got into power, when they was promoting net zero. Ed Miliband was there as well. I've been involved in APG's Healthy Homes Living, the launch of that document at the House of Lords. Another one with Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Manchester as well then. The Liverpool APPG. We actually did a scheme in Granby in Liverpool using MMC many years ago, but it never got anywhere as well then. So never know, these projects might resurrect itself. I've been on the judging panel for the British Homes Awards now for 3 years now, so that was my last year. That was me picking up my MBE. My son came all the way from Australia, and we're quite an unusual family because we are the STEM family. Each one of us has science, technology, engineering, mathematics. You know, we've all got degrees or within one of those STEM subjects. So when we're around the table, we have an interesting conversation. The future, this is where, for me, it starts getting exciting. Because I try, as I said, I try and reinvent myself every decade. And what I'm finding is that things that I've done a decade ago is now only just coming into mainstream. So where do I see the future? And for me, the future is in artificial intelligence. So I come up with the phrase, metaverse plus AI plus digital twin equals the future. We've seen digital twin. I've gone beyond that. AI, I'm working on AI now, and the metaverse is the next thing, and I'll explain that later on. I'm working with students, mentoring students, because they are the next generation for us. If we can't get students in to the industry, you know, we're going to suffer very badly. I'm working with a new company called Constructive Futures. I'm doing something at East London on Thursday with them, the Green Week. I'm showing them how to build with a kit of parts. You know, so we've linked up with Upanar and some other company, because for me, the future is that the new skills will be multi-skilled. They will be multi-skilled people. They won't be so individual tradespeople anymore. It's going to be like an assembly line where you have the workstations. You might be putting in the dashboard one week or the engine another week, you see. So that's the same with construction, and I've proved that I can do that. They're talking about quality buildings. You know, can we get the quality? Because they don't want to repeat in the future. And we've demonstrated it can be done. I'm a bit disappointed in this because the government is saying 1.5 million houses. I don't see anyone out there who was helping the SME builders. SME builders used to build all the houses. We are now dictated by the volume house builders. the Wimpies, I work for them, the Barretts, you know, the Waits, all these people. They're slowly getting into MMC, and I'm not saying that, but it's just taken a long time. But for the small builders, they're still building traditionally because they've got no way of getting into the MMC market, because the MMC manufacturers are giving out all their contacts to the larger builders. So where is it for the MMC? So what we did, we come up with a solution which we call Smart Kit House, that we've demonstrated that it can be built from a kit of parts. And how do we then get it to the small builders? So what we did with our small kit house and with our augmentative reality, and then we looked to train the SME builders, because we've started to develop our standards suite of details for them to understand, because we've taken the risk out of it for them because of what we did in our panelised housing. So we've de-risked it for them. You will see on the video, this is our MMC future temporary accommodation. What this does is that it's like a Rubik's Cube. Each local authority has a different mix, and what our solution is that you can mix it to whatever local authority wants, whether it's 1 bed, 2 bed, family use or wheelchair units. You can configure it to whatever you want. And there's a video at the end, and then we've got it on the meta classes at the end. So artificial intelligence, we're involved. We won Innovate UK grant, which we're looking to using AI and augmentative reality to train the next level of people using AI glasses. We've just won also another AI with the AAB's law, which I put a leaflet on your desk, that came into force last Monday, developing mould and damp and detecting mould and damp in buildings. And we've developed a platform for that as well then. As again, that was funded by Innovate UK as well. And we won the RISE Award, the Academia Award, from professors from university, Loughborough University, Leeds University, and University of Sussex came together, and we were selected for inspiration using AI. My last slide, this is the thing that's going to disrupt the whole industry. When you look at this computing power, the classical chip that we see today, the metaverse quantum chip calculation, it takes it 5 minutes. The classical chip would do that same calculation, would take 1 million years. Just think of it. The power in the quantum chip. That quantum chip will then be a unified data platform. That's what Apple does with their apps. They have a platform that everyone has to design for it to work. That will be the same for the quantum chip. The RIBA has just brought out a new book on AI, how we're going to use it. This is going to be the disruptor. What that will do is that it's going to bring all white-collar work onto one platform, whether you're an architect, whether you're a solicitor, whether you're a doctor, you will be able to get that data on that simple platform. It's mind-blowing thing. So yeah, and I see the future for me in the metaverse, just like in Formula One. Every year Formula One changes its rules, and then as the season finishes, they're already designing the next season car. And then that's done in the metaverse, it's tested in the metaverse before it's tested on track. I see for the planning system, everything will be in the metaverse. The services and everything, you'll be able to test everything in the metaverse before you put a spade in the ground. costings, all different house types. And I saw that recently at another architect studio who's doing that in hospital work, that they're experimenting with changing the climate in the hospital. It will redesign, and that's using the classical microchip. That's not even using quantum chip. So as architects, we have to wise up. And for me, for the BIM and for the principal designer, we can get our life back together as architect, as principal designer. If we try and give that out to anyone, we're going to lose control. We have the power to be the principal designer as architects. So, and then, as I said, the last slide is showing the video of it'd be playing in the background, of the Flexi Cube, and then you can have all different configuration. If it works, hopefully it should work. Will I click it again? Yes, there it goes. So you'll see that goes through with all the things. So, sorry, it's been a whistle stop, but I'm trying to put some sense into that then. So I'm ready for questions. Let that just play in the background. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. That was magnificent. You want to chair?
Yeah, thank you.
So, do you want to start?
So that's it.
That was so multifaceted in the best spirit of Temple Bar London, and so versatile and just in awesome intelligence applied to so many real-world pressing problems. So I'm really keen we open it up to the floor, but I think maybe we just have maybe 2 questions between us.
Okay.
So no sooner had we publicised this event than an architect, who shall remain nameless, made a comment on LinkedIn, and we have a huge need to speed up the house building process and actually deliver for all the multiplicity of pressing needs, but whilst not sacrificing quality. Now, one thing that he pointed out, because you were talking, weren't you, in your post about how we best deal with delivering high-quality emergency housing. And his view was, he said, rapid construction is not the solution. The industry has been talking about housing people in containers and tin cans for as long as I can remember, and I don't think I've seen one successful project in 20 years. Councils and housing associations with proven track records of good design and delivery should be supported to build directly by themselves, as this creates much better value for money and higher quality places. To which you answered, totally agreed, very diplomatic, but a temporary emergency intermediate solution is really badly needed, that moves away from B&B accommodation. And I'm not referring, this is you talking, to volumetric failures, such as shipping containers, which are MMC category 1, or stacked box systems, but you were referring to the MMC experience that you'd had on a panelised future-proof solution, MMC category 2, that can be configured and tailored to suit different family mixes from 1 person to 5 people, developed through active engagement with the community. And I thought that was a tremendous statement for you to make. Would you talk a little bit more about that and what you had in mind there? Because this is so badly needed. And if Steve Reed has not got you in, I mean, you need to be on the front line with this. I don't know why they're not.
Well, Steve Reed is Lambeth, isn't he? He used to be Lambeth, the chair of Lambeth, and I stopped. I didn't do any more work with Lambeth. But going back on to...
Was there a particular reason?
Yeah, because I was in Lambeth for 20 years.
Yeah.
I never got any work from Lambeth. I tell a lie. When I set up practice, they gave me 4 projects to do, and that was 4 public conveniences: Waterloo, Clapham Common, and Loughborough Junction, and one other. So I always used to say, well, you've got to start at the bottom. But yeah, so, and then I did all this work for Stockwell Park Estate and doing their work as well. But I mean, since doing the homelessness project with Centrepoint, I had always had a passion for homelessness, and but never. I saw the writing coming on the wall in 2017 when we designed this flexi temporary accommodation for families, and seeing how families living in temporary accommodation was just absolutely appalling. So we come up with this configurable solution, because I saw so many failed projects built from shipping containers, and it was horrendous, because the sizes they were, by the time you insulated it, was even narrower, and people having to live in those appalling conditions. It looked nice day one, but then after that,
Sure. Yeah.
you know. So the video playing in the background is my concept of a flexi temporary accommodation. The mayor, they did the homelessness, but for me, what they did was that their homelessness housing standard was the same standard as the general needs standard. So once the families got in there, they didn't want to move out, you see, which is only natural, you know. But whereas what we've done is that we've kept it below the standard, so it's just livable, but, you know, eventually if you've shown a bigger place, you'd want to move into that then.
Yeah.
So that was my solution on that then, you know, is the temporary accommodation.
Brilliant.
Which is there.
So before I open it to the floor, the other question that occurred to me, which is a critical piece of the puzzle, the solution, is that you pointed out that small SME builders are being left behind. And given that you've got such foresight with regard to generative AI and its huge potential, albeit that there are great drawbacks that we've got to be very cognizant of, how do you see the SME builders becoming themselves more entrepreneurial in terms of taking advantage of AI and coming on board with MMC? Because there are these obstacles that we've somehow got to overcome, and they shouldn't be on the other side of the wall with these issues, should they? They should be empowering themselves.
That's right, and there's so much work out there. And I've given this some thought, and I thought, architectural students are struggling, some of them getting jobs. Why don't they team up with these SME builders? They can then learn the craft of being actually on site, because there's a lot of these skills that we don't have, you know, and working on site, it just brings a lot of these skills. And if they can team up with small builders and with their knowledge of artificial intelligence, builders, a lot of them are lost in that, you know, and I think it's the marriage of those two coming together, you know, because if you look in America, a lot of those big developers, most of them started off being architects, you know, and I think that we're in a changing world, so we have to face it. We can't all be designers anyway, and with AI coming, you have to then look at other ways of doing things. And as we said, you know, there's all these houses that needs to be built. There's no way, in my opinion, they were going to hit that 1.5 million. I don't even think they're going to even hit the 1 million. But that 300,000 houses annually, do you know when that was brought in 1952? You know, it's not something new. It's just a target. So yes, I would think that now we've got an opportunity where we can start merging the two together, because as an industry, you know, we have to look at ways of how we can work together. Because at one time, yeah, the architect was the master builder and things like, but things are now changing, you know, with technology, in my opinion.
So you're hugely valuable to a number of organisations, not just Stephen Lawrence Foundation, but the other body that you mentioned. Are any of them actively pursuing that alignment project that you just laid out, the
Not really,
principles on?
not that I know. If I
No
come
one's-
up with these ideas, but you know, they don't. They
Well,
seem to
hopefully
fall
somebody in the room or somebody watching the video, since you don't give that many talks, might pick you up on that.
Hope so. Hope
Yeah.
so.
Fantastic. Well, that's really brilliant. I've certainly learned more about your work than I ever knew, and I thought I knew a lot. So that's.
And I've even shown half of them.
And yeah, exactly. You had a great labour to just pare it down. So let's ask a few questions. Yeah. So let's have Tanya first, and then Tim. We could answer two.
Hi, Tanya. I'm the Net Zero Carbon Manager at Lewisham, so always happy to see lots of Lewisham things. I guess I have a question and a concern. My question is, why are we here so far behind other places? I lived in a modular home in the States 25 years ago. I've gone to Rotterdam and seen the energy sprung factories where they're basically just 3D printing walls. They install them in a day. Thank you. It's net zero. My concern with the rise of AI, even though I absolutely do understand it, and I probably have slightly weird insight into quantum as well, because a friend of mine's a filmmaker who's just made a film about quantum. But I'm not sure how we keep all of the money going into AI from funding fascism, since that seems to be what billionaires are into right now. And so I'm trying to find a balance between wanting to be able to use computers to best effect and not removing the human element as we try to catch up with some other countries who just seem to be light years ahead of us in terms of both modular and panelized and sort of, volumetric as well.
I don't think, you might think, I don't think other countries are advanced than the UK on modular, because the UK is recognised for its ability in modular. I just came from a fact-finding tour in Florida when I went round a MMC factory that's been going since 1959, and they're no way in advance as what we're doing. Even if you look at Australia, they look at what Britain is doing, this kind of game changing, you know. I think we have our strengths in certain areas, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think you'll be able to stop AI. The thing that worries me about AI is that you're going to have 5 people or 5 companies that's going to control the whole world. Everything has to go through them. You saw what happened last week when Amazon network went down. And what's happening also is that you're getting the American companies buying up all the top quality companies in the UK and then shipping them over there. And then we then in turn will have to buy back that technology at a later date at a higher price, you know. And so it's frightening. I mean, it does frighten me, because I had this discussion yesterday that in Silicon Valley, a lot of the high network people, their kids don't have smartphones or anything like that. You know, they're banned from the family, but they will then put it on everyone else to use. And I'm seeing my daughter's a teacher, and everyone now is depending so much on ChatGPT and things, and you're going to lose those skills of making own judgment. We've got a next generation coming up who will only rely on what they're given by the technology, and that is really frightening, you know. But I don't know. I mean, you can't stop it. Those who don't buy into it, well, they're the ones that's going to be left behind, I'm afraid, in my opinion, you know. And it's how you then use it in a constructive way. And we can only have so much say in that, because the people who owns these companies, you know, that they're trying to restrict kids' restriction on them. It's slowly coming through, but what damage has it done up until then? I can't answer you, you know.
Thanks, Audley. Tim, another architect, and I'd love to see what the AI summary of your talk would be, which is always a fascinating search, but there were three things in my summary, non-AI summary. I mean, the first I got was how the future, for you anyway, is almost a natural extension of the past. And you know, with Ian Ritchie and then Walter Siegel and you know, all of these pioneers, not only in construction but in community, and that seemed to me to be one of the themes. But the second was that maybe we're working on different timelines. It's almost like, you know, there's a multiverse of time, that you've maybe seen the future earlier than a lot of the people that you've been working with, and that's a real challenge. It's like, what's the right time to be doing things? And the third one is maybe something about hope, and the hope that you expressed, one of them anyway, there's many hopes, but one was about the white collar, multi-skilled operative, which to me is, you know, is sort of classic definition of an architect, someone able to resolve multiple parameters into something elegant and functional and long lasting. But I wonder, what about the blue collar worker? And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about the robot, and you know, the robot who can not only manufacture but assemble. Have you seen anything that might threaten the trades in that regard?
Yeah, for me, I have two things. Is that if I'm advising young people, I'd say the future is the tradesman they're going to be the future. They're going to earn the money because they can do physical things with their hands. I don't think it's going to be years before we get robots actually being able to do that. So I think the hand skills is going to be important. The white collar, I mean, that's just going to get meshed up, because we're working with PwC, and what they've said is that in the next 10 years, AI is going to generate 1 million other types of jobs. Like when computers come, the shift went somewhere else. So that will be by 10 years, we will be generating more. But and looking at the future, we've seen all these robots. I mean, I saw Foster's in Loughborough when they did the 3D printing concrete buildings. That was 15 years ago. And for me, that hasn't gone on in leaps and bounds. Not like 3D printing. If you look at Formula One, they're now printing out whether it's carbon, metal, everything. If you can afford it, you buy Veyron, £10 million car. I mean, the crankshaft is digitally printed. It's so strong and so light, you know. And it won't be long before that technology comes back into everyday use, just like everything else, you know, just becomes cheaper and cheaper. But I think 3D printing will be there in one form sooner or later. Robots, I can't see that at the moment, but never say never. I learned to never say never. When I was at Wimpy's all those years ago, very briefly, and I gave him my notice, the head of architect, Mr. Black, called me and he said, Audley, blah, 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 you're leaving. You know, what we're doing is we're setting up a new team with computers. You know, we'd like you to be part of that team. I said, computers? You know, what's that? You know, I couldn't see that. Then when I went to the AA and John Turner set up a computer thing at his unit at the AA, and I was thinking, you know, okay. And then now it's just gone on and on, you know, and now everyone uses computers. Hardly anyone draws. So, I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong, sketching is the quickest way of doing it. I don't think you can come up with a thing. But once you've got that sketch, then the computer can take over and speed up that process. But that thought process, yeah.
Hi, thank you for an amazing speech. I have a few questions. One, where does urban planning, or how do you do that, come in with the prefab?
Right. Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, for me, urban planning coming with the prefab, I saw there's a company called UView, is it City View, who does all these 3D
View City.
View City. And then I thought, wow. Now, if you then have all your models there, and then it can cast your shadows in there. We did a bid in 2015 for Geovation, which I had the idea of. If you had a backland site or whatever, then you can use AI or computers to put all your shadow casting on and all that. Then you can get your different models. And I noticed that on some of them, there's some models, some software out there that you can put the site parameters in, and it will come up with 50 or 30 different permutation. And it's for you as the architect to select which one, because I know when I was doing design, you go through all these other options, and then you end up coming back to your original idea. You know, you try all these other things. So I think as AI gets more, and I'm not just saying AI, I really think once it gets more sophisticated, because AI is one of those things, rubbish in, rubbish out. So as people start putting quality rubbish in, you will get quality rubbish out. And then once you start tuning and tweaking those designs, you know, then the AI will get more adaptable to it, you know.
And do you find it also suitable for small sites? It is.
There is, yes, there's two companies now doing that for small sites, for garage sites, that they will then put in the site parameters, the heights of the building round, and it will just churn out different mixes. And the thing that I've learnt in planning is that the first thing that I always do is I always put where the refuge collection is. Because, and the turning circles to get your thing, because once you do a scheme and then you go for detail, then you do that. And that's what I learned sitting on the board of the Housing Association. That was the first question I used to throw to them, you know, where's the refuge collection point is, and blah, 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 you know, because at some stage they have to address those. And sometimes that can throw the scheme and change the scheme around as well. So those just basic, and the services coming into the site is fundamental. You know, where is the services coming into the site?
The question is, we've been involved in MMC for almost as long as you, not quite, but almost. But one of the things that we have, and we've had a stumbling block with, is with the industry and the key players in the industry. The fact is that we have tried to buy SIPS panels, CLT panels, or tried to standardise the sizes. The revenue that they make out of bespoking these simple panels and creating them so they're no longer standard sizes is where the money's at. It's not in, the money's not in the standardisation and simplification. If it could be simplified, that these were available in standard sizes in, say, Travis Perkins or any of the other sort of industry main then it will open up all the bloody small sites. This is a huge issue we find, and this is what I've found over the last 20 odd years. It's a real drawback to the industry. What do you say to that? Is there some sort of solution, or is there some way of sort of lobbying, or what? How would you deal with this sort of situation?
Yeah, there is that solution. We've had that with volume house builders, you know, they've said that, we've said that, this is the standard panel size, this will get you, this will drive down costs, but then they're not interested, it's 300 mil wider, you know, they want to work to that specific size, you know, and then that's where the expense comes, you know, and then they don't want, because then the price of getting it modular is more expensive than doing it traditional, because, you know, they can't afford, you know, if they can get another 1 unit, you know, and it goes up, you know.
No, I find that what they tend to do, sorry to interrupt, but what I find they tend to do is they don't want to sell you a standard panel size. They want it to be not standard, because that's where the money is for them. That's really where I'm sort of struggling with that. Because, you know, I don't really want to mention names, but I've been, you know, lobbying a variety of companies and factories in York and God knows where.
I think it only changes when people riot. It's the same reason, it's the same reason that we used to have 50 different phone chargers. And now you've got
Exactly.
your USB-C, because enough people went, F this, I'm not gonna play your game anymore. Like, I'd rather have a rotary phone than 42 chargers.
Well, it's like the Walter Siegel method, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
all standard sizes, wasn't
That's
it?
right.
Yeah.
The biggest problem with the industry, and I've criticised them, is that they want it disjointed. It's to their advantage to have it disjointed, because the mindset in the construction industry is bid low, then you make your money on the extras. They're not interested in getting it right first time, because there's no room for them to make that extra. And it's sad though, but that's the nature. And if it was like aerospace or cars, where you have a safety factor involved, then that would make a difference. And that will only now change when we've got from the Grenfell disaster, and we have the golden thread. You know, that will then, that's from buildings from 50 metres or above or whatever. But once they bring that down to all buildings, will have a digital footprint. But at the moment, the construction industry, as I said, MMC is over 400 years old, and we haven't got it right, and majority of people, they don't want it right because they can't earn the money from it, in my opinion. So if you come standardised and it's cheaper, you know, they'll want a bespoke where you have different sizes where they can make more money from. So that's a sticking point, I think.
There, architect and project manager. I was really interested in just how much you've produced over time, and how much of that has been built out and how much of that hasn't. I don't think it's any statement on the quality of what you've produced. I think it's more a kind of question that's thrown up about what are the perceptions around MMC, around modular build, that are such a barrier to it being taken up on a larger scale. And I think we have to say as architects that part of that is a sort of weddedness to a more traditional look, more traditional materials at times. And it's not that MMC can't now overcome some of those barriers, it's just that it's still perceived not to be something that's aesthetically pleasing to some people. And actually maybe some of the issues you've had with sites, I thought it was really interesting, your square of what you can have control over and what was sitting outside of that, the authorities, the planning processes, and you know, policies and other things that you don't have control over. It would just be great if you could talk a little bit more into that, because you've obviously had a huge amount of experience of that over the decades you've been working.
Yeah, well, I found that MMC, clients have been wary from that, because you see all the bad press that's been out there. All these companies are going under for whatever reason. And the simple question is that they didn't get their act together. What they were doing is that they was learning on the job at the expense of the client, you know. Instead of them perfecting what they've delivered and then upscaling that gradually, they've gone in with saying, yes, we can do this and do that. And they've left the client there holding, you know, the bag of defects, you know. And then clients talk, as you know, in the housing sector, social housing, they all talk. And so there's this uncertainty and this trust out there. And I said to Homes England many years ago, you have a duty. You shouldn't be funding development companies. What you should be doing is giving opportunities to developers or MMC companies. Give them a site, let them, and then fund them, and then you can then measure it, put tenants in there and measure it and learn from that experience. Don't invest in MMC companies. Let the market will sort itself out, you know. If you give 5 sites, you invite open tender MMC companies to just build, then you measure it, then you put it in so that tenants can live in there, so they have the true value of that. You know, that's why I did that project, was that I got frustrated when I approached contractors. I got hyper prices back and all that, so I just said, let me just do it myself. You know, that's the only way that you can learn. You know, so David, I think there's a reluctance on what other people, and that's what the media sees, and that's what the clients then sees. And there's a lot of MMC successful projects that's going on, but no one wants to report those, you know. That doesn't sell papers, you know. It's all the disasters that sells the newspapers, you know. But there is companies out there that are doing things, but they're doing it on a very sort of a small scale.
Done a lot of post-occupancy data on the properties that you have done. Because I think from the local authority perspective, this is always the challenge, is on the one hand, we do actually want to innovate, but especially for social housing, if you're asking social housing, our most vulnerable tenants to kind of be early adopters of technology, we have to at least have some sense of what that's gonna look like. So it is really hard. Nobody wants to be the first one through the gate. I mean, except for me, because I'm doing an MMC extension in 2 months, because I'm a mad person.
But I always visited the tenants that's moved into their properties, because that's the only way you're going to get feedback, you know, from there. And some of them has got fed up with me keep turning up, turning around, and what have you then, you know. But yes, that's something I was always criticised from in the early days. When I said I got 100% track record of planning, never had a failure. The reason why that was because I went round, I knocked on every door, spoke to the tenants, spoke to the owners, told them what I was trying to do, you know, what their objections would be, take on board their objections, go back and then say, and then we hardly ever had any objections, you know. But some housing association that I will remain nameless, they took that against us because they said, why are you consulting the tenants, you know? I mean, this was the early days. Now it's done, but in the early days, you know, I was castided for it, you know, and because I was brought up on a council estate, so I knew what living from a council estate, you know, what these things were meant to people. And you get these scaremongering stories that people just tell people, oh, you're going to have drug dealers living next door, you're going to have this or you're going to have that. And then, you know, so it's interesting. But yes, I always have done post, you know, myself to hear it from the horse's mouth.
I'm Phil Cooper. I'm a retired architect, house builder, actually. And a lot of what you said resonates with me very clearly. I've been through that mill. 2 questions. Forgetting what you're trying to do with the modern methods of construction, volumetric and so on, let's think about the constraints that happen outside your bubble, which were always the constraints, whatever, as a small house builder, and I'm not talking about designing for clients, I'm talking about building houses speculatively, which you've then got to sell on the market. You have to comply and recognise and design for the finance of those properties going forward. They have to be mortgageable. They have to comply with NHBC requirements. Many, many boring things that happen outside that bubble. How does that change with AI? That was the first question. And then the other question is that one always wants to design buildings that have flexibility and long life. In your experience, because I'm interested in your experience as opposed to mine, but mine is that you might design for all sorts of flexibility. There was a housing scheme which you said, well, you could combine these volumes together and then later on you could I was involved at Farrell Grimshaw designing some housing for Camden almost 50 years ago. And we designed for all sorts of complex future changes to cope with demographic. I'm not aware that that was ever done. And in your talk, you're talking about people fall in love with their buildings. The prefabs that were put up on Blackheath after the Second World War, it took them years to get people out of those because they loved them to death, because they'd been in appalling housing before. The Nazis had bombed that, and then suddenly they've got a little house with a garden and so on. And that's where Walter Siegel came in, didn't he, there? And that's how he recognised that people. So you design in flexibility, but flexibility is never used. And how do you cope with those organisations outside the bubble that hugely constrain what you do?
Yeah, my thinking, as I said, is that buildings are future-proof. The way that we've developed the building is that we have the fabric first solution, so you don't ever touch. The fabric is passive house standard, so that will always, and we have internally and the ceilings, we have the service zones, which in 30 years' time when you have to rewire or replumb, you can pull out the service zone, rerun your wire, you can put extensions on and anything, but you never touch the superstructure because that's where you got your passive house solution. And our system is that what we're considering is that you can add on, like the step houses, and it's the same concept that we're using we're doing a 30-storey tower block that is made from a kit of parts that you can build in 10 stories at a time. So when the value of the land goes up for that 10-storey, you can add another 10-storey, and then when the value is that. So that's the idea with the future-proofing the housing, so that the services can be upgraded at any time, and you can add to it. So I don't know if that's answered your question. The first part, your question was about.
The first part was to do with the constraints that are the boring bits that developers have to address. They have to buy the sites, And that's nothing to do with AI. The price of land is a huge.
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry, now I,
And then
yeah.
there are order constraints, not just planning, because planning's always been a problem, but there are other issues that are constrained developer other than the design of the building. And those, I don't see how AI is going to affect those.
Oh, yeah, I hear you now, yeah. What this company that I know is doing now is doing exactly what you're doing, what you're saying, is that you put the site parameters in, you can put all the data of the services and refuse collection or obstacle and rights of lights in. It can give you all different permutations. You can put the costing in per square metre of what you want to apply. So it gives you a breakdown, a preliminary cost of each layout that you have. And it gives you a ballpark figure, you know, of what you, and then you can play around with that to get where you want once you put all the data and the costings in. And I think, you know, because for a developer, if he doesn't make a profit, then why is he going to do it? You know, that's why a lot of them will sit on the land for a lot longer till the value of that land goes up so he can get his return. But there is, and that is going to be used from AI as well, generated for small plots as well, because I think there's 300,000 garage sites in the UK, and they're looking at how they can, Ministry of Housing have just financed a couple of small startups to come up with that solution for helping small builders, because they've realised now that the big contractors are not interested in those small brownfield sites, and it's going to be the smaller contractors. So how can they then build on those small sites cost effectively? And what they're looking at is pooling some of those sites together, 4 or 5 of them, to make it much more attractive, which is local together, than doing it individually, so to help drive down the cost.
So, Roger, Mayor, also an architect. Just reflecting on your very early slides, you had a shot of a drawing office when you were sort of taking your kind of effectively your apprenticeship as a technician, and then we're now talking about how AI and kind of generative design is going to be. 2 questions in one really is, do you think that this kind of progression is going to naturally shrink the profession? And how should or could this affect the way we have architectural education? I went to university in the 90s. I was told at the first year, don't touch a computer. Use a pen, learn how to draw, learn how to speak, learn how to communicate. That sort of education is gone. You talked at the end of your talk about something which is almost going back to the kind of the apprenticeship. Go and join a builder and work with them, get to know the reality of how to marry those 2 spaces together. So I'm kind of interested to hear if you have any thoughts about education.
I think the AI and as I was saying, the hard skills is a thing that's is how you amalgamate those 2 together. And with our architectural education, I know as an architect, I don't know many people that was trained to be business wise. You know, we was all designed to be architects when we came out, whether working practice or whatever. We learned the skills about business over time. So the future of architect, I mean, it is definitely going to change. You know, I'm afraid that architects, and the thing that I learned with drawing by hand and everything else is that, you know, you used to know how to set out A0 or A1 sheet of paper with your details and things like that. Now you can draw it on the computer, you can shrink it to whatever size, so they don't have that kind of sense of proportion that we had actually learning to hand draw things. So I think it's going to be a merger of the two, you know, and architects school now have to now think, because when I go on this weekend when we have tours around people's houses and open house, you know, I often try and go to Foster's, all the large practices, and I'm interested in seeing what they're doing with AIs and things like that. And the whole industry is changing because, you know, it's not just architect, it's a mixture of animators, all different skills in the architectural practice now, you know. Architects is just one of the disciplines, you know, out there. So the whole profession is changing. I saw something in BD today about how we're going to train the next cohort of architects coming through, and that's going to be challenging. Do we then how do we, because I think for me, training as a technician, I could detail, you know, I mean, some architect says I was a nightmare to work with because I was so meticulous, you know, in the detail, you know, which was, I expect, to my advantage thing. But, you know, can you detail, you know, have you got that experience, as I said, you know, going on site? Because, I mean, site don't really, I mean, they look at us as architects as airy-fairies, you know, we're not practical, you know, and I think, you know, you get that. Because I remember the first thing that our teacher said is that every line you draw on that sheet of paper represents something, so make sure you understand what you're doing. Don't put down a line on that drawing if you don't understand what it means, you know, and that's always sort of stuck in my head, you know, going forward. So, yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question, but it's tricky, you know. Upanar was the one who designed the plug-and-play system that Speedfix and all the other companies has now copied from since the patent has now lapsed, you know. And it's the same with wiring. We're looking at 12-volt wiring system for housing, you know, which I think is the future. So you don't need all these heavy core cables, and it's slowly bringing those modern technology in with different ways and how we can integrate that with artificial intelligence. Because when I went to one of the colleges and I was asking them about joinery and things like that, and they like the idea of using augmentative reality as training module going forward and helping them with their apprentices and things like that. Because on a lot of sites, if they're under 18, you can't get on site, so they don't have that working experience on site, whereas through augmentative. And we've got the MI glasses here, just showing a shorter version of that video on there if anyone wanted to have a look at it then.
Well, that sounds like a great opportunity. It's a nice way to close off. Thank you so much. What an incredible brain you have. It is both immensely pragmatic but also hugely visionary, and it's like a masterclass in future-proofing housing and shelter. I mean, I just keep coming back to the centrality of shelter, and I think, wow, yeah. So Walter Siegel was obviously is one of your heroes.
My biggest hero is Buckminster Fuller.
But I was going to say, do you have a bigger hero? Yeah.
He was 50
revealing.
years ahead of his time.
Fantastic.
You know, yeah.
Okay, well, he's a font of all knowledge, great wisdom, great insights, fantastic questions. Let's a big round of applause for Audley.